April 29, 2025. President Franklin Delano Roosevelt popularized the idea that the first 100 days of a presidency established an administration's direction. As soon as he took office on March 4, 1933, he called Congress into special session to meet on March 9th to address the emergency of the Great Depression. Congress responded to the crisis by quickly passing 15 major bills and 77 other measures, first to stabilize the economy and then to rebuild it. On July 24, 1933, FDR looked back at the crowding events of the 100 days, which had been devoted to the starting of the wheels of the New Deal. In a fireside chat broadcast over the radio, FDR explained that his administration had stabilized the nation's banks and raised taxes to pay for millions in borrowing. That federal money was feeding starving people, as well as employing 300,000 young men to work in the Civilian Conservation Corps, planting trees to prevent soil erosion, building levees and dams for flood control, and maintaining forest roads and trails. It was also funding a public works program for highways and inland navigation, as well as state-based municipal improvements. The government had also raised farm income and wages by regulating agriculture and abolishing child labor. FDR was speaking on July 24th to encourage Americans to get behind a program of shorter hours and higher wages to create purchasing power that would restart the economy. It goes back to the basic idea of society and of the nation itself, that people acting in a group can accomplish things which no individual acting alone could even hope to bring about, he said. If I am asked whether the American people will pull themselves out of this depression, I answer, they will if they want to. Today is the 100th day of President Donald Trump's second term in office. He marked it by delivering what amounted to a rally outside Detroit, Michigan, in which he claimed his had been the most successful first 100 days of any administration in the history of our country, and that's according to many, many people. This is the best, they say, 100-day start of any president in history, and everyone is saying it. We've just gotten started. You haven't seen anything yet. In fact, Trump has signed just 5 measures into law: the Laken-Riley Act, which Congress passed before he took office, a stopgap funding measure, and 3 resolutions overturning rules set by the Biden administration. But Trump's administration does parallel FDR's in an odd way. Trump set out in his first 100 days to undo the government FDR established in his first 100 days. Trump has turned the nation away from 92 years of a government that sought to serve ordinary Americans by regulating business, providing a basic social safety net, promoting infrastructure, protecting civil rights, and stabilizing global security and trade. Instead, he is trying to recreate the nation of more than 100 years ago, in which the role of government was to protect the wealthy and enable them to make money from the country's resources and its people. Trump set out to destroy the modern American state, gutting the civil service and illegally shuttering federal agencies, as well as slashing through government programs. His team has withdrawn the U.S. from its global leadership and rejected democratic allies in favor of autocrats like Russia's Vladimir Putin. At home, he has imitated those autocrats, ignoring the rule of law and rendering migrants to prison in El Salvador without due process, and using the power of the state to threaten those he perceives as his enemies. As is typical with autocratic governments, corruption appears to be running deep in this White House. The president and his family are openly profiting from his office. And it would be hard to find a better example of a government letting cronies profit off public resources than Interior Secretary Doug Burgum's relinquishing of control over the department to a doggy operative, or of a government permitting businesses to profit from ordinary Americans than billionaire Elon Musk's apparent creation of a master database of Americans' information. Trump's dismantling of the modern American state has been a disaster. Trump spoke tonight in Michigan to tout his hope that his new tariffs will center auto manufacturing back in the U.S. But the economic chaos his tariff policies have unleashed has turned what was a booming economy 100 days ago sharply downward. That economic slump, along with Trump's illegal renditions of men to El Salvador and the gutting of services Americans depend on, has given Trump the lowest job approval rating after 100 days of any president in 80 years. And that suggests another way to look at the first 100 days of a presidential term. For all that the 100 days trope focuses on presidents, the first 100 days of Trump's second term have shown Americans, sometimes encouraged by their allies abroad, pushing back against Trump to restore American democracy. Democratic attorneys general began to plan for a possible Trump second term in February 2024, preparing for cases they might have to file if Trump followed through with his campaign promises or implemented Project 2025. California, with 5,600 staffers in its Department of Justice, and New York, with 2,400, carried much of the weight. They were able to file their first challenges to Trump's January 20 executive orders on January 21st. Their lawsuits, and those of others, have been so successful that they have sparked both Trump and MAGA Republicans to attack judges and even the judiciary. Early observers of the movement to stop Trump's destruction of the modern state argued that the opposition was too burned out to mount any meaningful pushback against a newly emboldened Trump. But in fact, people were not in the streets because they were organizing over computer apps and at the local level, a reality that burst into the open at Republican town halls in late February as angry voters protested government cuts at the hands of Musk's Department of Government Efficiency. On March 4th, Representative Richard Hudson, a Republican of North Carolina, the head of the House Republicans' campaign arm, told Republicans to stop holding town halls to stop the protests from gaining attention. So Democrats began holding their own packed town halls in the absent Republicans' districts. On March 20th, 2025, Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, a Democrat of New York, and Senator Bernie Sanders, an independent of Vermont, launched their Fighting Oligarchy tour in Las Vegas. Unexpectedly, huge crowds flocked to their rallies across the West, revealing a deep well of unhappiness at the current government, even in areas that had voted for Trump. At 7 o'clock on the evening of March 31st, Senator Cory Booker, a Democrat of New Jersey, launched a marathon speech attacking the Trump administration and imploring Republicans to defend democracy because, he said, he had been hearing from people all over my state, and indeed all over the nation, calling upon folks in Congress to do more, to do things that recognize the urgency, the crisis of the moment. And so we all have a responsibility, I believe, to do something different, to cause, as John Lewis said, good trouble. And that includes me. Before he finished 25 hours later on April 1st, his speech, the longest in congressional history, had been liked on TikTok 400 million times. The quiet organizing of the early months of the administration showed when the first call for a public hands-off protest on April 5th produced more than 1,400 rallies in all 50 states and turned out millions of people. Organizers called for an end to the billionaire takeover and rampant corruption of the Trump administration, an end to slashing federal funds for Medicaid, Social Security, and other programs working people rely on, and an end to the attacks on immigrants, trans people, and other communities. On April 11th, Harvard University rejected the administration's demand to regulate the intellectual and civil rights conditions at Harvard, including its governance, admissions, programs, and extracurricular activities, in exchange for the continuation of $2.2 billion in multi-year grants and a $60 million contract. Harvard's lawyers wrote, "The The university will not surrender its independence or relinquish its constitutional rights. Neither Harvard nor any other private university can allow itself to be taken over by the federal government. Accordingly, Harvard will not accept the government's terms as an agreement in principle. Harvard is not prepared to agree to demands that go beyond the lawful authority of this or any administration. Last Sunday, April 27th, Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker gave a barn-burning speech to Democrats in New Hampshire, telling them to fight everywhere and all at once. Never before in my life have I called for mass protests, for mobilization, for disruption. But I am now, he said. These Republicans cannot know a moment of peace. They have to understand that we will fight their cruelty with every megaphone and microphone that we have. We must castigate them on the soapbox and then punish them at the ballot box. They must feel in their bones that when we survive this shameful episode of American history with our democracy intact, because we have no alternative but to do just that we will relegate their portraits to the museum halls reserved for tyrants and traitors. And so, even as Trump tries to erase the government FDR pioneered, Americans are demonstrating their support for a government that defends ordinary people and proving the truth of FDR's words from 1933, that when people act together, they can accomplish things which no individual acting alone could even hope to bring about.
Letters from an American was written and read by Heather Cox Richardson. It was produced at Soundscape Productions, Dedham, Massachusetts. Recorded with music composed by Michael Moss.